Chapter 1: The Meeting. In the serene yet tense atmosphere of a small town in the south of France, the year 1942 was marked by the devastating impacts of World War II. Amid the backdrop of this historic turmoil, the picturesque town of Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, known for its lavender fields and ancient Roman ruins, had transformed into a hub of wartime activity. The war had altered the rhythms of daily life, and the once peaceful streets now echoed with the urgency of a community under siege. Marie Dufresne, a young woman in her mid-20s, had found her calling amidst the chaos. Raised in a family of modest means, Marie had always harbored a deep desire to help others. Her compassionate nature led her to train as a nurse, a role she embraced with unwavering dedication. With her chestnut hair often tied back in a practical bun, and her expressive brown eyes reflecting both kindness and determination, she became a pillar of strength for many. The makeshift hospital where Marie worked was set up in an old monastery, its ancient stone walls now serving as a refuge for the wounded and weary. The corridors, once silent, were filled with the sounds of moans, whispered prayers, and the hurried footsteps of medics and nurses. Despite the grim reality, Marie managed to create an atmosphere of hope and care. Her days were spent tirelessly tending to the injured soldiers and civilians, her hands deftly administering medicine, stitching wounds, and offering comforting words. One fateful afternoon, a group of French resistance fighters arrived at the hospital, carrying with them a severely injured comrade. The atmosphere was charged with urgency as they brought in Thomas Moreau, a young soldier who had been wounded in a skirmish with German forces. Thomas, a resilient and courageous man in his late 20s, had been instrumental in sabotaging enemy operations and gathering intelligence. His bravery, however, had come at a great personal cost. Thomas had sustained multiple injuries, including a deep gash on his leg and shrapnel wounds on his torso. As he was placed on a stretcher, his face pale and contorted in pain, Marie immediately took charge. She could see the determination in his blue eyes, despite the agony he was in. There was an unspoken understanding that he was fighting for more than just his life, he was fighting for the freedom of his country. As Marie began to clean and dress Thomas's wounds, their eyes met for the first time. In that fleeting moment, amid the chaos and suffering, there was a spark of connection. Marie's gentle touch and calm demeanor provided a stark contrast to the violence and turmoil that had brought Thomas to her care. He found solace in her presence, a brief respite from the horrors of war. Over the following weeks, as Thomas recuperated under Marie's vigilant care, their initial connection deepened. Marie often sat by his bedside, talking softly to him as she changed his bandages or administered medication. They spoke of their lives before the war, finding comfort in sharing their stories. Thomas told Marie about his family, his love for the French countryside, and his dreams of a liberated France. Marie shared her aspirations of becoming a nurse to help those in need and her cherished memories of childhood adventures in the fields and forests around Saint-Rémy. As Thomas began to recover, he and Marie would spend more time together, walking slowly through the hospital gardens. These walks, though necessary for Thomas's physical rehabilitation, also became a cherished part of their day. They would talk for hours, losing themselves in each other's company. Despite the war raging outside, the gardens became their sanctuary, a place where they could momentarily forget the horror surrounding them. The bond between Marie and Thomas grew stronger with each passing day. Marie admired Thomas's unwavering resolve and courage, while Thomas was deeply moved by Marie's compassion and strength. They found in each other a kindred spirit, someone who understood the weight of the war and yet provided a beacon of hope. One evening, as the sun set over the distant hills, casting a golden hue over the landscape, Thomas took Marie's hand in his. His voice, though still weak, carried a warmth that made her heart race. "Marie, I don't know what the future holds for us, but I want you to know that meeting you has given me a reason to fight even harder. For our country, yes, but also for a future where we can be together." Marie's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of a profound emotion that she had not felt before. She squeezed his hand gently and replied, "Thomas, whatever happens, know that I will always be here for you. You've given me hope in these dark times, and for that, I am forever grateful." Their love blossomed in the unlikeliest of places, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. In a world torn apart by war, Marie and Thomas found a rare and precious connection. It was a love forged in adversity, one that would sustain them through the darkest of days and become a guiding light in the uncertainty of their future. As Thomas's strength returned and he prepared to rejoin the fight, they both knew that their paths might soon diverge. But they held on to the promise of a reunion, a future where they could live in peace and love, far from the shadow of war. For now, their hearts beat in unison, bound by a love that transcended the chaos and brutality of the world around them. Chapter 2: Love in the Time of War. The world around Marie and Thomas was engulfed in the horrors of World War II, yet amidst the rubble and despair, their love found a way to flourish. In the shadow of war, their connection became a beacon of hope and light. The makeshift hospital, a once sacred monastery now turned into a sanctuary for the wounded, became the setting where their love story unfolded. The old stone walls, which had witnessed centuries of history, now bore silent witness to the birth of a profound love. As Thomas's recovery progressed, he and Marie learned to cherish the stolen moments they could spend together. These brief interludes, away from the prying eyes and the constant hum of wartime activity, became their refuge. They would sit together in the dimly lit corners of the hospital, their voices hushed and intimate. The flickering candlelight cast soft shadows on the walls, creating an ethereal atmosphere that seemed to exist outside the bounds of time and conflict. In these precious moments, Thomas would often speak of his dreams for a future beyond the war. His voice, though still marked by the strain of his injuries, carried a note of hope that warmed Marie's heart. "I dream of a peaceful France," he would say, his blue eyes reflecting a distant light. "A place where children can play in the streets without fear, and where the fields are filled with the laughter of farmers bringing in their harvests." Marie listened intently, her hand gently resting on his. She could see the depth of his longing for a normal life, one that had been violently disrupted by the war. In response, she would share stories from her own past, painting vivid pictures of her childhood in Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. She spoke of the lavender fields that stretched as far as the eye could see, the sweet scent of the flowers filling the air. She told him about her family's modest home, nestled among the hills, and the simple joys of her youth, climbing trees, chasing butterflies, and the warm, comforting presence of her parents. These exchanges were more than just words, they were lifelines that tethered them to a vision of a future that seemed increasingly out of reach. In the quiet solitude of their conversations, they found solace and strength. Each whisper, each shared dream, was a defiant act of hope against the encroaching darkness. The hospital, despite its grim purpose, became a backdrop for their burgeoning romance. Marie's responsibilities as a nurse were demanding, but she always found time to be with Thomas. They developed a routine, a series of small rituals that brought a sense of normalcy to their chaotic lives. Every evening, after Marie had tended to the last of her patients, she would find her way to Thomas's side. He would be waiting for her, his face lighting up as she approached. Together, they would sit in the garden, a small, overgrown patch that still retained some of its former beauty. The air was often filled with the sounds of distant artillery and the rumble of tanks, but within the confines of the garden, a semblance of peace prevailed. They would talk about their plans for the future, imagining a life where the war was but a distant memory. Thomas spoke of returning to his family's vineyard in the Loire Valley. He described the rolling hills covered in grapevines, the annual harvest that brought the community together, and the cellar where barrels of wine aged to perfection. One day, he would say, "We'll sit together on the veranda, watching the sun set over the vines, a glass of our finest vintage in hand." Marie, her eyes shining with love and hope, would add her own dreams to the tapestry they were weaving. She envisioned a small cottage on the outskirts of Saint-Rémy, with a garden where she could grow flowers and vegetables. "We'll have a simple life," she would say, "filled with love, laughter, and the warmth of family. We'll raise our children to be kind and courageous, to appreciate the beauty of life." Despite the constant danger that loomed over them, they found moments of joy and laughter. Thomas, with his sharp wit and playful nature, often made Marie laugh with his stories and observations. He would recount tales of his comrades, their acts of bravery and their moments of folly, bringing a sense of levity to their heavy hearts. Marie, in turn, shared her own anecdotes, moments from her nursing days that, despite the grim context, carried a touch of humor and humanity. Their love grew stronger with each passing day, an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of war. They became each other's anchor, a source of unwavering support and understanding. The hospital staff, though preoccupied with their own duties, couldn't help but notice the special connection between Marie and Thomas. Their relationship became a symbol of resilience and hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, love could still bloom. One particularly cold evening, as winter tightened its grip on the region, Thomas and Marie found themselves alone in a small, cozy room within the hospital. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, casting a warm glow that contrasted with the chill outside. Thomas, his hand still bandaged but gaining strength, took Marie's hand in his. "Marie," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of vulnerability and determination, "I don't know what the future holds. This war, it has taken so much from so many. But I promise you this, when it's over, I will find you. We will be together, and we will build the life we've dreamed of." Tears welled up in Marie's eyes as she looked into his. "Thomas, I believe in us. No matter what happens, we will find our way back to each other. I promise you." They sealed their vows with a tender kiss, a moment of profound intimacy that transcended the chaos surrounding them. It was a promise not just of love, but of resilience and hope. They held on to each other, drawing strength from their shared commitment. As the months wore on, the war's impact became even more pronounced. The hospital saw an influx of wounded soldiers, and the strain on resources and personnel grew. Yet, through it all, Marie and Thomas's love remained a constant, a source of inspiration for everyone around them. They continued to find ways to be together, to support each other, and to dream of a brighter future. One day, news arrived that Thomas's unit was being called back to the front lines. The reality of their situation hit them hard, but they faced it with the same courage that had sustained them thus far. They spent their last evening together in the garden, holding each other close and whispering their love and promises into the night air. As Thomas prepared to leave, he gave Marie a small, worn book of poetry, its pages filled with his favorite verses. "Keep this with you," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Whenever you read it, know that I am thinking of you." Marie clutched the book to her chest, her heart aching with the impending separation. "I will," she promised. "And I will keep our dreams alive until we can be together again." Their farewell was tearful but filled with a quiet strength. They knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but their love had given them the courage to face whatever came their way. As Thomas walked away, his silhouette fading into the distance, Marie stood tall, her heart full of hope and determination. Despite the war, despite the uncertainty, Marie and Thomas held on to the promise of a future together. Their love, nurtured in the shadow of war, had become a powerful force that transcended the horrors surrounding them. It was a love that would endure, a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope. Chapter 3: Separation. The fateful day arrived with an air of foreboding that settled heavily over Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. The once serene town, now a theatre of war, had witnessed countless departures, but this one felt especially poignant. Thomas had received his orders to join a critical mission against the occupying forces, a mission fraught with danger and uncertainty. As a key member of the French resistance, his skills and bravery were indispensable, and though he faced the assignment with a sense of duty, the thought of leaving Marie weighed heavily on his heart. Marie, upon hearing the news, felt a wave of dread wash over her. The inevitability of Thomas's departure seemed to cast a shadow over everything, and the future they had so fervently dreamed of together suddenly seemed precariously fragile. They spent their remaining time together clinging to every precious moment, trying to imprint each other's presence in their minds and hearts. The hospital, once their sanctuary, now felt like a place of impending sorrow. The night before his departure, Thomas and Marie found solace in the quiet corner of the hospital garden, where they had shared so many dreams and whispered promises. The garden, bathed in the soft glow of moonlight, seemed to hold its breath along with them. They sat close, hands intertwined, drawing comfort from each other's touch. Thomas spoke softly, his voice filled with a mixture of resolve and tenderness. "Marie, this mission, it's something I have to do. For our country, for our future," he said, his eyes searching hers for understanding. Marie nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know, Thomas. And I believe in you. I wish things were different." He pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her as if to shield her from the world. "When this is over, we'll be together again. I promise you that. No matter what happens, hold on to that promise." With a heavy heart, Marie reached into her pocket and pulled out a small locket. It was an old, simple piece of jewelry, but it held great sentimental value. Inside, she had placed a tiny photograph of the two of them, a snapshot of happier times. She pressed it into Thomas's hand, her fingers lingering on his. "Take this," she said, her voice trembling. "Keep it with you, and know that my love is with you always. Let it keep you safe." Thomas looked at the locket, his eyes brimming with emotion. He opened it and gazed at the photograph, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I will carry it with me always," he promised, his voice thick with emotion. "It will remind me of what I'm fighting for. Of you." The following morning, the town was cloaked in a somber stillness as Thomas prepared to leave. Marie stood by his side, her heart heavy with a mixture of pride and sorrow. They walked together to the edge of town, the early morning mist wrapping around them like a shroud. The resistance fighters, ready to move out, stood waiting in silence, their faces grim with determination. Thomas turned to Marie, taking her hands in his. "I'll come back to you," he whispered, his voice filled with conviction. "No matter how long it takes, I'll find my way back." Marie's tears finally fell, silent and unbidden. She squeezed his hands tightly, as if trying to hold onto him for just a moment longer. "And I'll be here, waiting for you. Always." They shared a final, lingering kiss, their tears mingling as they clung to each other. The world seemed to hold its breath as they parted, and with one last, lingering glance, Thomas turned and joined his comrades. Marie watched as he disappeared into the distance, her heart aching with each step he took away from her. Days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The rhythm of life at the hospital continued, but for Marie, time seemed to crawl. She threw herself into her work, tending to the wounded with a fierce determination that masked her inner turmoil. Every day, she hoped for word from Thomas, some sign that he was safe. But the days passed in silence, and her heart grew heavier with each passing moment. The locket became a constant presence around her neck, a tangible reminder of the man she loved and the promise they had made to each other. At night, she would hold it close, whispering prayers for his safety and return. She kept their dreams alive in her heart, clinging to the hope that they would one day be realized. The war raged on, bringing with it new challenges and sorrows. The hospital was inundated with the injured and dying, the toll of the conflict etched into the faces of those who passed through its doors. Marie remained a beacon of strength for those around her, but inside, she struggled with her own fears and uncertainties. The absence of news from Thomas gnawed at her, and she found herself plagued by nightmares of him lost or suffering. One particularly difficult night, as she sat alone in her small room, Marie allowed herself to give in to the tears she had held back for so long. She clutched the locket tightly, her sobs echoing in the silence. "Please, Thomas," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Come back to me." Despite the overwhelming despair, Marie refused to let go of hope. She knew that Thomas was out there, somewhere, fighting not just for France, but for their future. She drew strength from their shared moments, the promises they had made, and the love that had sustained them through the darkest times. The seasons changed, and with each passing day, the war edged closer to a turning point. News of Allied victories began to filter through, bringing a glimmer of hope to the war-weary town. Marie clung to these snippets of good news, allowing herself to believe that the end of the conflict might be near, and with it, the return of her beloved Thomas. Her colleagues at the hospital, aware of her silent struggle, offered their support in quiet, unobtrusive ways. They knew the depth of her love for Thomas and the agony of waiting for news. They admired her strength and resilience, and in their own way, they tried to lift her spirits. Small gestures of kindness, a hot cup of tea, a warm blanket, a shared moment of laughter, became lifelines that helped her endure the long, uncertain wait. Months turned into a year, and still, there was no word from Thomas. Marie's hope, though battered, remained unbroken. She continued to believe in their promise, in the future they had envisioned together. The war might have taken many things from her, but it could not take away her love or her determination to see that love realized. One day, as Marie was tending to a particularly grievous case, a soldier with fresh injuries was brought in. His face was unfamiliar, but as she began to treat him, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "I was told to give this to Nurse Marie," he said, his voice weak but insistent. Marie's heart leapt as she took the note, her hands trembling. She unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the familiar handwriting. It was from Thomas, a brief message written with the urgency of a man on the move. "Marie, my love. I am alive and fighting. The mission was successful, but I cannot return yet. Hold on to hope. We will be together soon. Yours always, Thomas." The flood of relief and joy that washed over her was overwhelming. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the note to her chest. Thomas was alive. He was fighting, and he still held their promise close to his heart. Marie's renewed hope infused her with a fresh surge of energy. She continued her work with renewed vigor, buoyed by the knowledge that Thomas was out there, fighting not just for France, but for their future. The promise of their reunion became a guiding light, a beacon that cut through the darkest nights. Despite the long separation and the countless uncertainties that lay ahead, Marie held steadfast to the love they had nurtured in the shadow of war. She knew that their love was stronger than any obstacle, and that one day, they would be together again, free from the burdens of war and able to build the life they had always dreamed of. Chapter 4 of the Letter. As the war raged on, each passing day felt like an eternity for Marie. The uncertainty about Thomas's fate gnawed at her, and her heart ached with a longing that never seemed to abate. She clung to the brief note she had received from him months earlier, reading it over and over until the words were etched into her soul. That scrap of paper had become her lifeline, a reminder that Thomas was still out there, fighting for their future. One crisp autumn morning, as the golden leaves fell softly to the ground, Marie was going about her duties in the hospital when she was summoned to the administration office. The matron handed her a letter, its edges worn from travel, and Marie's heart immediately began to race. She recognized the military seal on the envelope, and her hands trembled as she tore it open, fearing the worst. The letter was from Thomas's commanding officer. As Marie's eyes scanned the carefully typed lines, her worst fears began to materialize. The words seemed to blur together as she read them. "It is with a heavy heart that I inform you, Nurse Marie, that Thomas has been reported missing in action. His unit was engaged in a critical mission behind enemy lines, and during the operation, Thomas and several others became separated from the main group. Despite our best efforts, we have been unable to locate him. There is no further information at this time. We will continue to search and provide updates as we receive them." Marie's knees buckled, and she sank into the nearest chair, clutching the letter to her chest. Her world seemed to implode as the reality of the words hit her with full force. Thomas was missing. Not dead, but not safely in her arms either. The uncertainty was a cruel torment, worse than a definitive answer, because it left her stranded in a limbo of hope and despair. For hours, she sat in that chair, the letter crumpled in her hands, her mind a whirlpool of emotions. The hospital buzzed around her, but she was lost in her own grief, the walls closing in as the enormity of her loss overwhelmed her. She thought of all the moments they had shared, the dreams they had spun together, and the promises they had made. She felt as if a vital part of her had been ripped away, leaving an aching void that nothing could fill. As evening fell, the matron found her still sitting there, her face pale and eyes distant. With a gentle hand, she helped Marie to her feet and led her to a small, private room where she could collect herself. "Take your time, Marie," she said softly. "We're all here for you." Marie nodded absently, her thoughts still consumed by the letter. She found herself in a small room with a single bed and a wooden chair. She sat down and pulled the locket from around her neck, opening it to gaze at the tiny photograph inside. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Please come back to me, Thomas. Please." The days that followed were some of the hardest Marie had ever endured. Each morning she woke with a heavy heart, dreading the possibility of more bad news, but clinging to the hope that Thomas might still be alive. She continued her work at the hospital with a renewed sense of determination, throwing herself into caring for the wounded as if by doing so, she could somehow ensure Thomas's safe return. Her colleagues, aware of her anguish, rallied around her. They offered words of comfort and shoulders to cry on, understanding that while the war had taken so much from them all, it seemed particularly cruel to strike at the heart of someone who had given so much to help others. The solidarity and support of her friends became a crucial lifeline for Marie, helping her to navigate the dark and uncertain days. Marie found solace in small, daily rituals that kept her connected to Thomas. Every evening, she would sit by the window with the locket in her hand, whispering prayers for his safety. She also began writing letters to him, pouring her heart out onto the pages. These letters, which she never sent, became a way for her to process her grief and keep her hopes alive. She wrote about her day, the patient she had cared for, and the dreams she still held for their future. In these letters, she reaffirmed her love and her belief that they would one day be reunited. Months passed, and winter settled over Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. The cold winds and grey skies mirrored Marie's inner turmoil, but she refused to let despair take root. The war continued to demand her strength and resilience, and she rose to the challenge, knowing that she was not alone in her suffering. The hospital was filled with stories of loss and hope, each patient a reminder of the human cost of the conflict and the enduring power of love and courage. One particularly harsh winter evening, as Marie made her rounds in the hospital, a group of soldiers arrived with fresh injuries. They had been part of a recent skirmish and were in urgent need of care. As Marie tended to them, one of the soldiers, a young man with a bandaged leg, looked at her with recognition. "You're Marie, aren't you?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Marie nodded, her heart skipping a beat. "Yes, I am. Do you know something about Thomas?" The soldier nodded slowly, his expression grave. "I was with him during the mission. We got separated, and I was captured. But before that happened, Thomas, he saved my life. He told me about you, said you were the reason he kept fighting." Marie's breath caught in her throat. "Is he?" The soldier shook his head. "I don't know what happened to him after we were separated. But I can tell you this, Thomas is a fighter. He wouldn't give up easily. If anyone can make it back, it's him." Marie felt a flicker of hope reignite within her. She thanked the soldier, her heart swelling with renewed determination. Thomas was out there, somewhere, and she had to believe that he was doing everything in his power to return to her. The winter dragged on, each day blending into the next. Marie's routine remained the same, filled with the endless tasks of nursing and the quiet moments of reflection and prayer. She continued to write her letters, each one a testament to her enduring love and unwavering faith. Spring finally arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal and possibility. The fields around Saint-Rémy-de-Provence began to bloom, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers and the songs of birds. Marie took comfort in the changing seasons, seeing in them a metaphor for her own journey. Just as the earth renewed itself after the harshness of winter, she too could find strength and hope after the darkest of times. One bright morning, as Marie was tending to a garden outside the hospital, a courier arrived with a letter. Her heart raced as she recognized the handwriting, Thomas's commanding officer. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope and began to read. Dear Marie, I am pleased to inform you that we have received news regarding Thomas. He has been found and is currently recovering in a military hospital. Though he has endured many hardships, his spirit remains unbroken. He will be transported back to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence as soon as he is able. I know this has been an incredibly difficult time for you, and I hope this news brings you the relief and joy you so deserve. Sincerely, Captain Henri Lefebvre. Marie's heart soared as she read the words. Thomas was alive. Tears of joy streamed down her face as she clutched the letter to her chest. The months of uncertainty and fear melted away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of gratitude and anticipation. She immediately ran to the hospital to share the news with her colleagues, who rejoiced with her. The entire town seemed to come alive with the joyous news, a collective sigh of relief and celebration. Marie's hope, which had been tested to its limits, had been rewarded. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation and anticipation. Marie continued her work with renewed vigor, her heart light with the knowledge that Thomas would soon be back in her arms. She dreamed of their reunion, of the life they would build together, free from the shadows of war. Finally, the day arrived. A convoy of military vehicles rolled into town, and Marie stood at the hospital gates, her heart pounding with anticipation. She scanned the faces of the soldiers, searching for the one she loved. And then, there he was, Thomas, thinner and paler, but very much alive. Their eyes met, and in that instant, the world seemed to stand still. Marie ran to him, her heart bursting with joy. They embraced, holding each other tightly as if afraid to let go. Tears streamed down their faces, but these were tears of happiness, of relief, and of love. Thomas, you're home, Marie whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Thomas held her close, his voice equally filled with emotion. I promised you, didn't I? I promised I'd come back to you. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, the horrors of war fading into the background. Their love, tested by the trials of separation and the uncertainties of war, had endured and emerged stronger than ever. Together, they would face whatever the future held, their hearts united by a bond that nothing could break. Chapter 5: The Search. Marie's heart was a tumult of emotions. Despite the joy and relief of learning that Thomas had been found, the subsequent realization that he had disappeared again filled her with a renewed sense of determination. The news of his initial rescue had been a cruel tease, offering a glimmer of hope only to snatch it away. But Marie refused to let despair take root. She resolved to find Thomas herself, driven by the love that had sustained her through the darkest times. The decision to leave Saint-Rémy-de-Provence was not made lightly. Marie knew the dangers that lay ahead, the war-ravaged landscapes, the precariousness of travel in such perilous times. But her heart was steadfast. She packed a small bag with essentials, taking the locket and the letters she had written to Thomas, reminders of the love and promises that had kept her going. With a heavy heart, she bid farewell to her friends and colleagues at the hospital. They had become her family, offering support and strength during the long months of uncertainty. "Be safe, Marie," the matron said, embracing her tightly. "We'll be praying for your safe return and for Thomas." Marie nodded, her resolve unwavering. "Thank you. I have to do this. I have to find him." Her journey began on a cold, clear morning. She traveled by foot and occasionally hitched rides with military convoys or passing travelers. The war had transformed the countryside into a patchwork of devastation and resilience. Villages lay in ruins, their inhabitants displaced or struggling to survive amidst the chaos. Yet, amid the destruction, there were pockets of hope and humanity, people who, like Marie, clung to the belief that love and courage could overcome even the darkest of times. Marie's quest led her through towns and villages, each with its own story of suffering and survival. She approached anyone who might have seen Thomas, showing his photograph and describing him in detail. Many had witnessed the horrors of war, but few had any information that could help her. The answers she received were often the same: sympathetic looks, shakes of the head, and murmurs of regret. In one particularly war-torn village, Marie encountered an elderly woman who had seen countless soldiers pass through. "I've seen many faces, my dear," she said, her eyes filled with sorrow. "But I haven't seen the man you're looking for. I'm sorry." Marie's heart ached with each dead end, but she refused to give up. She pressed on, driven by the memory of Thomas's smile, his voice, and the dreams they had shared. Her journey took her through forests and fields, across rivers and over mountains. She braved treacherous terrain and the constant threat of enemy patrols. Each night, she found shelter wherever she could, often in abandoned buildings or with kind strangers who offered her a place to rest. The nights were the hardest. Alone with her thoughts, Marie's mind often wandered to the worst possible scenarios. She clutched the locket tightly, whispering prayers into the darkness. "Please be safe, Thomas. I'm coming for you. Hold on just a little longer." Weeks turned into months, and Marie's hope began to wane. She had traveled far and wide, encountered countless people, but still, there was no sign of Thomas. Exhaustion and despair began to creep in, and she wondered if her journey would ever lead her to the man she loved. One cold, rainy evening, Marie found herself in a small, battered village near the front lines. The air was thick with tension, the sounds of distant artillery echoing in the distance. She approached a group of soldiers gathered around a fire, their faces gaunt and weary. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I'm looking for someone. Have any of you seen this man?" She showed them the photograph of Thomas. The soldiers studied the photograph, their expressions unreadable. One of them, a young man with tired eyes, finally spoke. "I think I've seen him," he said slowly. "A few months ago, near the front lines. He was with a group of soldiers who were trying to cross enemy territory. It was a dangerous mission, and I don't know what happened to them after that." Marie's heart leapt at the glimmer of hope. "Can you show me where?" The soldier hesitated, then nodded. I can point you in the right direction, but it's dangerous. The area is heavily guarded, and the fighting is intense. I don't care, Marie said, her voice firm. I have to find him. The soldier gave her directions, and Marie set out the next morning, her resolve stronger than ever. The journey to the front lines was perilous, the sounds of battle growing louder with each step. The landscape was scarred by war, with trenches crisscrossing the fields and abandoned equipment scattered everywhere. Marie moved cautiously, using whatever cover she could find. Days turned into a blur of movement and survival. She encountered other refugees and soldiers, each with their own stories of loss and hope. She shared her own story with them, and though few could offer tangible help, their empathy and encouragement bolstered her spirits. One evening, as she was resting in a makeshift shelter, Marie met a group of resistance fighters. They were a ragtag band, united by their common cause of fighting against the occupiers. She shared Thomas's photograph and story with them, and they listened intently. One of the fighters, a woman named Lucille, looked closely at the photograph. I remember him, she said, her voice thoughtful. He was with a group that tried to infiltrate an enemy camp not far from here. It was a risky mission, and we lost contact with them. Marie's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and hope. Do you know where they might have gone? Lucille nodded. There's an old farmhouse a few miles from here. It's been used as a hiding place by our fighters. If he's still alive, he might have taken refuge there. Marie thanked Lucille and the others, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The next morning, she set out for the farmhouse, her steps quickened by the possibility of finding Thomas. The journey was fraught with danger, but she pressed on, her love for Thomas giving her strength. As she approached the farmhouse, Marie's heart raced. The building was dilapidated, its windows shattered and walls pockmarked by bullets. She moved cautiously, her eye scanning the area for any signs of life. Pushing open the creaking door, she stepped inside, her breath held in anticipation. The interior was dimly lit, and the air was thick with the smell of damp and decay. Marie called out softly, "Thomas? Are you here?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. Marie's heart soared as she recognized the gaunt but familiar face of Thomas. He looked tired and worn, but his eyes lit up with recognition and relief. "Marie," he whispered, his voice hoarse. She ran to him, tears streaming down her face as she threw her arms around him. "Thomas, I found you. I found you." They clung to each other, their tears mingling with the dust and grime of the farmhouse. For a long moment, they simply held each other, the weight of their separation melting away in the warmth of their embrace. "I never gave up," Marie said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I knew I had to find you." Thomas held her tightly, his own eyes brimming with tears. "I knew you would. I held on to that hope every day." As they stood there, reunited at last, the horrors of war seemed to fade into the background. They had found each other, and that was all that mattered. The farmhouse, though battered and broken, became a sanctuary for their love, a testament to the power of their enduring bond. Marie and Thomas knew that their journey was far from over. The war still raged on, and there were challenges ahead. But they faced the future together, their hearts united by the love that had guided them through the darkest times. With each step they took, they carried with them the memories of their separation and the promise of a brighter tomorrow, a future where they could finally build the life they had always dreamed of. Chapter 6: The Discovery. Marie had been on the road for what felt like an eternity. Every day brought new challenges and uncertainties, but she pressed on, her heart fueled by a singular purpose: finding Thomas. The landscape was a harsh reminder of the war's relentless grip on the world around her. Yet, amid the ruins and desolation, she clung to the hope that she would one day be reunited with the man she loved. After months of tireless searching, her perseverance led her to a small village nestled in a valley that had been spared the worst of the conflict. It was here that she met Jack, a weathered soldier who had been part of Thomas's unit. He sat in a dimly lit tavern, nursing a drink, his face etched with the lines of hardship and loss. Marie approached him cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me," she said softly, holding out the photograph of Thomas. "Have you seen this man?" Jack looked at the photograph, his eyes narrowing as he focused on Thomas's face. He nodded slowly, recognition dawning. "Yes, I know him. We were in the same unit." Marie's breath caught in her throat. "Do you know where he is?" Jack took a deep breath, his expression turning somber. Thomas was captured during a mission behind enemy lines. He was taken to a POW camp not far from here. Marie's heart leapt with a mixture of fear and hope. "Do you know where the camp is?" Jack nodded. "It's about 2 days' journey from here, deep in enemy territory. It won't be easy to get there, but I can give you directions." Marie listened intently as Jack described the route to the camp, committing every detail to memory. She thanked him profusely, her heart brimming with gratitude and a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you, Jack. This means the world to me." Jack nodded, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding of her plight. "Be careful, Marie. The journey is dangerous, and the camp is heavily guarded. But if anyone can do it, I believe you can." Armed with this new information, Marie set out the next morning. The path to the camp was fraught with peril, but her determination was unwavering. She traversed dense forests and crossed treacherous rivers, navigating by the stars when the path was unclear. The physical demands of the journey were immense, but her love for Thomas gave her strength. After days of arduous travel, Marie finally reached the outskirts of the camp. It was hidden deep within a forest, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. She approached cautiously, her heart pounding with anticipation and fear. As she neared the camp, she realized it had been abandoned. The gates were ajar, and the guard towers stood empty. Marie's heart sank as she entered the deserted camp. The air was thick with the lingering scent of despair and suffering. She wandered through the empty barracks, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The realization that the prisoners had been moved hit her like a physical blow. Her hopes, so carefully nurtured, seemed to shatter in an instant. She fell to her knees in the center of the camp, the weight of her journey and the crushing disappointment overwhelming her. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched the locket that had become her constant companion. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Where are you?" For a long time, Marie sat there, the abandoned camp a stark reminder of the brutal reality of war. But as the initial shock began to subside, a steely determination took hold of her heart. She had come too far and endured too much to give up now. Thomas was out there, somewhere, and she would find him. Marie rose to her feet, wiping away her tears. She began to search the camp for any clues that might indicate where the prisoners had been taken. The barracks were empty, the beds stripped bare, but in the corner of one room, she found a tattered piece of paper. It was a crude map, hastily drawn, showing the route the prisoners had taken when they were moved. Hope flickered within her as she studied the map. It was a lead, however tenuous, and it was all she had. She tucked the map into her bag and left the camp, her resolve stronger than ever. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but she would not be deterred. Marie followed the map through dense forests and over rugged hills. The path was difficult, but each step brought her closer to Thomas. Along the way, she encountered villagers and resistance fighters, each offering bits of information and words of encouragement. She learned that the prisoners had been moved to a larger camp further north, closer to the front lines. The days turned into weeks as Marie pressed on, her body weary but her spirit unbroken. She faced countless obstacles, from treacherous terrain to the ever-present threat of enemy patrols. But her love for Thomas was a beacon, guiding her through the darkest moments. One cold, foggy morning, she reached the outskirts of the second camp. This one was much larger and more heavily guarded than the first. She observed it from a distance, noting the routines of the guards and the layout of the camp. It was a daunting sight, but Marie was undeterred. She spent several days carefully planning her approach, gathering information from sympathetic locals and resistance fighters. She learned of a supply route that was less guarded and decided to use it to gain access to the camp. Disguising herself as a local peasant, she approached the camp under the cover of darkness. The night was tense, every sound magnified by her heightened senses. Marie slipped through the shadows, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached the supply gate and waited for the right moment to slip inside. The guards, weary and distracted, did not notice her as she entered the camp. Once inside, Marie moved quickly, her eye scanning the rows of barracks for any sign of Thomas. She whispered his name, hoping for a response. As she passed one of the barracks, she heard a faint, familiar voice. "Marie?" She turned, her heart leaping with hope. There, standing in the dim light of a small window, was Thomas. He looked thinner and more haggard than she remembered, but his eyes shone with the same warmth and love that had drawn her to him. "Thomas," she whispered, rushing to the window. They clasped hands through the bars, tears streaming down their faces. "I knew you'd find me," Thomas said, his voice filled with awe and relief. "I never gave up," Marie replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "We're getting out of here. Together." Thomas nodded, his grip on her hand tightening. "I knew you would come. I held on to that hope every day." With Thomas's help, Marie quickly formulated a plan to escape. The camp was vast and well guarded, but they were not alone. Thomas had made friends among the other prisoners, and together they devised a strategy. Under the cover of darkness, they would create a diversion, allowing Marie and Thomas to slip away unnoticed. The night of their escape was fraught with tension. As the other prisoners initiated the diversion, Marie and Thomas made their move. They slipped through the shadows, their hearts pounding with fear and anticipation. The diversion worked, drawing the guards' attention away from their escape route. They reached the perimeter of the camp and slipped through a gap in the fence. Marie's heart soared as they ran through the forest, the sounds of the camp fading behind them. They didn't stop until they were far from the camp, hidden deep within the forest's embrace. Exhausted but elated, they collapsed onto the forest floor, holding each other tightly. For the first time in months, they were free, and they were together. "Thank you, Marie," Thomas whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You saved me." Marie held him close, her heart overflowing with love and relief. "We saved each other. We'll never be apart again." As dawn broke, casting a golden light over the forest, Marie and Thomas began their journey back to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the war was far from over, but they faced it together, their love a guiding light through the darkness. Their journey was long and arduous, but they were buoyed by the strength of their bond and the knowledge that they had overcome the worst. With each step, they moved closer to the life they had dreamed of, a life free from the shadows of war. Marie and Thomas knew that their story was not yet finished, but they faced the future with hope and determination. They had found each other against all odds, and together, they would build the life they had always dreamed of, a testament to the enduring power of love and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Chapter 7: The End of the War. The war's end was a bittersweet symphony playing out across the ravaged landscapes of Europe. Cities lay in ruins, villages were shadows of their former selves, and the scars of conflict marred the land and its people. Amid this backdrop of devastation, Marie's quest to find Thomas remained her guiding star. Her determination was a beacon of hope in a world striving to heal from the horrors it had endured. The days and nights blurred together as Marie tirelessly scoured records, questioned officials, and traveled from one war-torn town to another. She moved through makeshift camps and relief centers, her eyes scanning the faces of survivors, her heart aching with each passing day. The hope that Thomas was still alive was a fragile thread she clung to with unwavering faith. One crisp autumn morning, as Marie was poring over yet another set of records in a relief office, a Red Cross worker approached her with a guarded yet hopeful expression. "Are you Marie Dupont?" the woman asked. Marie's heart skipped a beat. "Yes, that's me. I think we have some information about Thomas," the worker said, handing her a document. "The POWs from the camp you mentioned were liberated a few weeks ago. They've been brought to a recovery center just outside Paris." Marie's breath caught in her throat as she read the words on the paper. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Could it be true? After all these months of searching, could Thomas really be among the liberated? Without wasting a moment, Marie gathered her things and set out for the recovery center. The journey was a blur, her mind racing with thoughts of Thomas. She imagined their reunion 1,000 times, each scenario filling her with hope and anxiety. The roads to Paris were bustling with activity as the city began to stir with the early signs of recovery. Refugees, soldiers, and civilians moved through the streets, each person a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The recovery center was a large, sprawling complex on the outskirts of the city, a place where the liberated prisoners were being cared for and slowly reintegrated into society. Marie approached the entrance, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the murmur of voices, the soft rustle of medical staff moving through the halls, and the distant laughter of those beginning to find joy again. She entered the main reception area and approached the desk. "I'm looking for Thomas," she said, her voice trembling. "Thomas Lauron. He was a prisoner at a camp that was recently liberated. The nurse behind the desk gave her a compassionate smile. "We have a list of names. Let me check for you." She flipped through a large ledger, her finger tracing down the list. Finally, she stopped and looked up at Marie. "He's here. Thomas Lauron is here." Marie's knees nearly gave out. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you." The nurse gave her directions to the wing where Thomas was recovering, and Marie followed them with a mixture of eagerness and trepidation. As she walked down the long corridor, she saw other former prisoners, some sitting quietly, others talking with newfound friends or family members. Each face told a story of suffering and survival, of a journey through the darkest of times. Finally, she reached the room number she had been given. She paused outside the door, taking a deep breath to steady herself. With a gentle push, she opened the door and stepped inside. Thomas was sitting by the window, looking out at the garden below. The sunlight streamed in, casting a warm glow over him. He looked thinner, with the shadows of his ordeal still etched on his face, but to Marie, he was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice breaking. Thomas turned, and for a moment, it seemed as if time stood still. His eyes widened with disbelief, and then filled with tears of joy. "Marie," he said, his voice choked with emotion. He stood up, and in an instant, they were in each other's arms, holding on as if they would never let go. "I knew you would find me," Thomas whispered into her hair. "I never stopped believing." Marie clung to him, her tears soaking his shirt. "I never gave up. I knew I had to find you. I love you, Thomas." They stood there, wrapped in each other's embrace, the weight of their separation melting away. The room around them faded into the background as they were lost in their reunion, the culmination of their long and arduous journey. Over the next few days, Marie and Thomas spent every moment together, sharing stories of their time apart, their struggles, and their unwavering hope. Thomas told Marie about his capture and the harsh conditions of the POW camp, but also about the friendships he had formed and the strength he had drawn from the thought of seeing her again. Marie recounted her own journey, the countless towns and villages she had traveled through, the people she had met, and the unyielding determination that had kept her going. They laughed and cried together, healing each other's wounds with their shared love and experiences. As the days turned into weeks, Thomas grew stronger, his health improving with each passing day. The world outside continued its slow process of healing, the scars of war beginning to fade as people rebuilt their lives. Marie and Thomas returned to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, where they were welcomed with open arms by their friends and colleagues. The small town, though touched by the ravages of war, was a place of hope and resilience, and it became the backdrop for the next chapter of their lives. They were married in a small, heartfelt ceremony, surrounded by those who had supported them through their darkest times. The locket that Marie had given Thomas before his mission was a symbol of their enduring love, and it rested close to his heart as they exchanged their vows. With the war behind them, Marie and Thomas began to build the life they had always dreamed of. They worked together to help rebuild their community, drawing strength from their love and the unbreakable bond that had carried them through the storm. Their love story, forged in the fires of war, became a beacon of hope for those around them, a testament to the power of love, resilience, and unwavering faith. And as they faced the future together, hand in hand, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would overcome them together, their hearts forever united by the journey they had shared. Chapter 8: The Reunion. The bustling recovery center was a microcosm of human resilience, filled with the sounds of cautious laughter and whispered conversations. Survivors of unimaginable ordeals were slowly finding their footing again, supported by tireless medical staff and volunteers. Marie, however, was focused on one thing: finding Thomas. Her heart pounded with anticipation and anxiety as she moved through the throngs of people, her eyes scanning each face with desperate hope. The hallways were lined with rows of cots, and each step brought a mixture of fear and hope. Marie looked at each person, searching for the familiar features of the man she loved. The atmosphere was heavy with a mix of relief and sorrow, as survivors reunited with their families, while others waited in agonizing uncertainty. Suddenly, across the room, she saw him. Thomas was sitting on a cot near a window, bathed in the soft, golden light of the setting sun. He looked frail and gaunt, the harsh realities of war etched into his features. Yet, there was a spark in his eyes, a glimmer of the man she had fallen in love with. For a moment, Marie's heart stopped, and then it began to race, her emotions surging like a tidal wave. "Thomas," she cried out, her voice breaking with emotion. Thomas turned his head slowly, almost disbelieving what he was hearing. When his eyes met hers, his expression shifted from confusion to sheer joy. He stood up, though unsteadily, and in that moment, they both began to move towards each other. It was as if the world had shrunk to just the two of them, and nothing else mattered. They collided in an embrace, their arms wrapping tightly around each other. Tears streamed down their faces, mingling as they held on, neither willing to let go. The months of pain, fear, and longing melted away in that instant, replaced by the overwhelming relief of being together again. "Marie," Thomas whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You found me." "I never gave up," Marie replied, her voice trembling. "I knew I had to find you. I love you so much." They stood there, locked in their embrace, oblivious to the world around them. It was a reunion that spoke volumes without words, a testament to the power of their love and the strength they had drawn from each other even in the darkest times. As they finally pulled back to look at each other, Marie saw the toll that the war had taken on Thomas. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollowed by the hardships he had endured. But there was also a resilience there, a strength that had kept him going. She touched his cheek gently, her heart aching for all that he had been through. "We're together now," she said softly. "We'll get through this, Thomas. We'll rebuild our lives." Thomas nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of relief and determination. "As long as we're together, we can face anything." The days that followed were a blur of activity and healing. Thomas was placed under the care of the center's medical staff, who began the slow process of nursing him back to health. Marie stayed by his side, offering him the strength and support he needed. They talked for hours, sharing stories of their experiences during their separation. Thomas spoke of the friends he had made in the camp, the small acts of kindness that had kept him going, and the hope that had sustained him, the hope of seeing Marie again. Marie, in turn, recounted her journey across the war-torn countryside, the people she had met, and the unwavering belief that she would find him. They laughed and cried together, their bond growing even stronger as they healed each other's wounds. As Thomas grew stronger, they began to make plans for their future. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy, the scars of war were deep, and the world was still in the process of rebuilding. But they faced the future with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Marie and Thomas decided to return to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, the town where their love story had begun. The town, though scarred by the war, was a place of hope and resilience. It was a place where they could start anew, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds that had once brought them so much joy. Their journey back to Saint-Rémy was a symbolic one, marking the end of a long and arduous chapter in their lives. As they walked through the streets of the town, hand in hand, they were greeted by friends and neighbors who welcomed them with open arms. The town had been through its own trials, but there was a sense of community and solidarity that had grown stronger in the face of adversity. Marie and Thomas moved into a small house on the outskirts of the town, a place where they could build their future together. They worked tirelessly to rebuild their lives, drawing strength from each other and from the support of their community. Thomas found work helping to reconstruct the town's infrastructure, while Marie resumed her nursing duties, caring for those who had been affected by the war. Their love, tested by the harshest of circumstances, emerged stronger and more resilient than ever. They faced each new challenge with the same determination and hope that had carried them through the war. Their story became a beacon of hope for others, a testament to the enduring power of love and the human spirit. As the months turned into years, Marie and Thomas built the life they had always dreamed of. They were blessed with children, who grew up hearing the story of their parents' extraordinary journey. The locket that Marie had given Thomas before his mission became a cherished family heirloom, a symbol of the love and determination that had brought them together. In the quiet moments, as they sat together watching the sunset over the fields of Saint-Rémy, Marie and Thomas would often reflect on their journey. They had been through so much, but they had come out stronger on the other side. Their love had been their guiding light, leading them through the darkest of times to the bright future they now enjoyed. And so, as the world slowly healed from the ravages of war, Marie and Thomas continued to live their lives, forever grateful for the love that had sustained them and the strength that had brought them back together. Their reunion was not just the end of one chapter, but the beginning of a new and hopeful one, a testament to the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. Chapter 9: A New Beginning. The journey back to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence was bittersweet for Marie and Thomas. The town, though scarred by the ravages of war, held the memories of their early love and the promise of a new beginning. As they walked through the familiar streets, hand in hand, they felt a deep sense of gratitude for having found each other again. The devastation around them was a stark reminder of all they had endured, but it also fueled their determination to rebuild their lives and their community. Their return was met with a mixture of joy and sorrow by the townspeople. Many friends and loved ones had been lost to the war, but those who remained welcomed Marie and Thomas with open arms. There were tears of relief and sorrow, hugs that conveyed the pain of loss and the joy of survival, and a collective resolve to move forward. Marie and Thomas decided to marry in a small, heartfelt ceremony, surrounded by the few loved ones who had survived the war. The local church, damaged but still standing, became the venue for their union. The wedding was a simple affair, marked by the absence of many who should have been there, but it was filled with a profound sense of love and hope. Marie wore a dress she had mended herself, a symbol of resilience and new beginnings. Thomas, though still recovering from his ordeal, stood tall beside her, his eyes reflecting the strength and determination that had carried him through the darkest times. As they exchanged vows, they promised not only to love and cherish each other but also to honor the memory of those they had lost and to help rebuild their shattered world. The ceremony was both solemn and joyous. The townspeople gathered in the church, their hearts heavy with memories of the past but lifted by the promise of the future. As Marie and Thomas sealed their vows with a kiss, there was a collective sigh of relief and happiness. It was a moment of healing, a beacon of hope that even in the face of unimaginable hardship, love could endure and triumph. In the days that followed, Marie and Thomas threw themselves into the task of rebuilding their community. Thomas found work helping to reconstruct the town's infrastructure, his skills as a craftsman in high demand. Despite his physical frailty, he worked tirelessly, driven by a sense of purpose and a desire to contribute to the recovery of his hometown. Marie returned to her role as a nurse, tending to the physical and emotional wounds of the townspeople. She provided care and comfort to those who had been scarred by the war, her compassion and strength a source of inspiration for all who knew her. She also became a counselor of sorts, offering a listening ear and words of encouragement to those struggling to find their way in the post-war world. Together, Marie and Thomas found joy in the simple moments. They took pleasure in the daily routines of life, finding beauty in the mundane tasks that had once seemed trivial. They spent their evenings walking through the fields, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the landscape. They shared stories and dreams, their bond growing ever stronger as they navigated their new reality. Their love story, marked by love and resilience, became a beacon of hope for others who had suffered during the war. The townspeople looked to Marie and Thomas as symbols of what could be achieved with determination and unwavering faith. Their story was retold countless times, each recounting a testament to the enduring power of love and the strength of the human spirit. As the years passed, Saint-Rémy-de-Provence slowly regained its former vitality. New buildings rose from the ruins, businesses reopened, and life returned to the town. Marie and Thomas played an integral part in this renaissance, their efforts and dedication leaving an indelible mark on the community. They raised a family, their children growing up in a town that bore the scars of war, but also the promise of a brighter future. Their home became a sanctuary, filled with laughter and love. The locket that Marie had given Thomas before his mission, a symbol of their enduring love, was passed down to their children, a cherished family heirloom. It was a reminder of the journey they had taken and the love that had sustained them through the darkest times. Marie and Thomas aged gracefully, their love for each other deepening with each passing year. They remained active in their community, continuing to offer support and guidance to those in need. Their legacy was one of resilience, compassion, and unwavering hope. In the twilight of their lives, Marie and Thomas often sat together on their porch, watching the sun set over the fields of Saint-Rémy. They would hold hands, their fingers entwined, and reflect on the incredible journey they had shared. They had faced unimaginable hardships, but their love had been their guiding light, leading them through the storm to the peaceful and fulfilling life they now enjoyed. Their story, a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit, was one that would be remembered for generations. It was a reminder that even in the face of the greatest adversity, hope and love could prevail. And as they looked out over the town they had helped to rebuild, Marie and Thomas knew that their love had made a difference, not just to each other, but to all who had been touched by their journey.